Fixing one engine doesn't mean you know what you're doing. No one laughed. Not this time. Donovan's voice cut in, low and sharp. You challenged her, Wes. She answered. Traz tugged at his sleeve cuffs. Maybe she got lucky. Luck doesn't rewire relays or reprogram ECUs, Ree said. You saw it. We all did. Traz's jaw clenched. The room was slipping from him, and he knew it. He glanced around for backup, but the faces staring back weren't so loyal anymore. Julia didn't defend herself. She didn't need to. She unplugged her phone from the diagnostic port and wiped her hands on a rag. I wasn't trying to prove anything, she said. You put me on the spot. I just didn't want my dad to look bad. That line hit harder than she expected. Donovan looked at her, quietly proud, the way dads are when words aren't needed. Refolded his arms. She's the first person in this shop who didn't overthink that engine. She just saw the issue and fixed it. Yeah, added an older mechanic, voice gravelly. Been turning wrenches for 30 years, and I missed the same stuff she caught in 15 minutes. Traz scoffed. So she's got a sharp eye. Doesn't mean she's trained. Didn't say I was, Julia said calmly. But neither were half the guys you hired. That one cut deep. Silence again. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Donovan spoke next. She's been helping me rebuild engines in the backyard for years. I thought it was just a hobby at first. Then she started fixing things I didn't even know were broken. Ree squinted at Julia. Wait, how long's she been doing this? Julia looked up. Since I was 12. Someone gave a low whistle. Traz turned toward her, more quiet now. So you're self-taught? I watched my dad, ask questions, took things apart, put them back together, messed up a lot. Learned more from that than anything else. Another mechanic chuckled. That's how most of us learned. She's one of us, whether you like it or not. Traz didn't respond. He didn't need to. His face said enough. This wasn't how he'd imagined the day going. Behind them, the engine still rumbled, alive and steady. Julia turned away from Traz and eyed the bay again. You'll still want to change the oil before running it too long. Sitting that long, the viscosity's probably garbage. Ree laughed. She's not wrong. Then someone finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air. You ever think about doing this for real? Julia blinked. What do you mean? Like, full-time, making it your job. There's shops that would kill for hands like yours. Donovan looked at her, curious about what she'd say. Julia shrugged. Maybe. I like building things. I like when broken stuff finally clicks. You've got a gift, Ree said. Traz muttered something under his breath, but nobody asked him to repeat it. Then Victor, a younger mechanic, pointed to her backpack. You didn't even bring a laptop. You fixed that thing with your phone. What else you got in there? Julia smiled, just barely. Tablet, 2 diagnostic apps, an old coil I've been rewiring, and some sandwiches. This time the room laughed, genuinely laughed. But right as things started to feel comfortable, Julia was about to drop something that would flip their view of her upside down. Ree leaned against the workbench, still grinning. Sandwiches too? You came fully loaded. Julia just smirked and kept scanning the engine, her mind still ticking, running through variables like a conductor listening to a symphony. Victor leaned in, staring into the engine bay like it had grown wings. I've never seen it idle this smooth. Last guy said the timing chain might have jumped. Nope, Julia said. Timing was fine. It just didn't know when to breathe. Ree turned to Donovan. You must be real proud. Donovan didn't even look away from Julia. I've always been proud. This was her moment. The room, once thick with doubt, had started to thaw around her like cold metal slowly warming to the sun. But Traz wasn't ready to let go. He stepped forward, clearing his throat with that same smug smirk, tugging at his mouth, trying to reclaim control. All right, he said. Impressive. Sure. But I've seen flashes of talent before. Doesn't mean she's ready for the real thing. Julia turned toward him, calm but firm. You think that wasn't real? Traz shrugged. One fix doesn't mean much over time. Before Julia could respond, Ree cut in. Come on, man. We've been struggling with this for weeks. She walks in, gives it a once-over, and it runs better than ever. That's not luck. That's skill, Traz muttered under his breath. Let's not act like she's Einstein. Julia didn't flinch. Instead, she walked around the car and pulled a grease-smudged envelope from her backpack. She handed it to Ree. He raised an eyebrow, unfolded the letter slowly, and let out a low whistle. No way! What? One of the mechanics asked. Ree turned the letter around. The header read Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In bold print halfway down, full academic scholarship awarded for mechanical engineering aptitude and independent project submission. Victor's jaw dropped. You got into MIT? Julia nodded. They offered the scholarship last month. I submitted a design for a modular combustion engine that cuts waste output by 30%. Built the prototype out of scrap. The garage fell silent. Even the engine seemed to purr quieter. Traz leaned in, reading the letter, but said nothing. You submitted this at 17? Ree asked. Used parts left behind by my dad's customers, Julia said simply. One of the older guys scratched his chin. So you built a working engine in your backyard? Yep. Ree held up the letter like it was proof of some old garage legend come to life. Why didn't you start with this? Julia shrugged. Didn't think I needed to. The atmosphere shifted. Skepticism cracked open. Some looked embarrassed. Others quietly amazed. Traz looked like a man who had just bet against a royal flush. Donovan stepped forward. She's not here to prove herself. She's just doing what she loves. Ree turned to Traz, shaking his head. She's more qualified than half of us, and none of us even saw it. Still, Traz clung to his pride. Doesn't mean she's ready for pressure. She was under pressure, Ree snapped. You turned this into a dare. She turned it into a masterclass. The engine still purred, steady, warm, a sharp contrast to the tension Traz couldn't hide anymore. Victor grinned. If MIT's already calling her, I can't wait to see where she ends up in 5 years. She's ahead of most college grads. Ree nodded. No doubt. Donovan looked at his daughter. Want to tell them what you've been doing on the weekends? Julia hesitated, then shrugged. Fixing lawnmowers, rebuilding go-karts, some freelance coding. Freelance coding? Victor blinked. I built my own scan tool, wrote the software from scratch. Low whistles and mutters circled the garage again. This girl wasn't just talented, she was a whole category they hadn't even considered. But more than admiration, something else was taking root. Reflection. Wesley Traz stood with his arms crossed, but the confidence he'd worn like armor had slipped. He was watching Julia like someone watching a storm they thought would pass, only to realize it was settling overhead. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her work had already said everything that mattered. Finally, Rick, the quiet one, mid-40s, seen 100 apprentices come and go, broke the silence. You're going to make it out there, he said. Not just because you're smart, but because you stayed calm when we doubted you. Julia looked down at her hands, still stained with grease. I've gotten used to it. Rick frowned. Used to what? People not expecting much, she said, looking at me like I'm supposed to stay small, quiet, invisible. Ree stepped forward, wiping his hands on a rag. They do that to everyone at some point. Julia met his eyes. Maybe, but not like this. That stopped him, not because he didn't understand, but because he did. Traz scoffed. You're making this about something it's not. Julia finally looked at him. You did that when you made my dad a punchline just for bringing me here. Donovan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He was behind her, always. Ree muttered, she's got a point. Victor added, Wes, she didn't ask for any of this. You made it a show, and now you don't like how it ended. The room cracked open a little more. Traz looked at the floor, jaw tight, but everyone knew it was over. Rick leaned on a tool cart. When I first started, my foreman told me, you don't learn much from the guys who think they know it all. You learn from the ones still asking questions? She asked the right ones. Julia gave a small nod. Ree chuckled. I remember thinking I was hot stuff for syncing a transmission with a flashlight and a prayer. She's out here programming ECUs and building engines like it's summer camp, someone else said, and never once tried to show off. That's rare. Julia hadn't come looking for admiration, but now that it was there, it felt earned. Donovan turned to her. You've been quiet your whole life, but when something's broken, you speak loud. Julia smiled, just barely. Ree looked at her thoughtfully. We talk about respect in here all the time, but we don't always give it to the right people. That changes today. Even Traz didn't argue, Ree continued. If she wanted to walk in here tomorrow and work beside us, she could. She'd hold her own better than most. She's not coming back, Donovan said. She's got bigger things ahead. The weight of that truth hung in the air. The engine purred again, perfectly tuned. Victor laughed softly. Still can't believe she fixed it with a phone and a backpack. Julia looked around the shop. You're all good at what you do, she said. But sometimes the problem isn't the engine. It's how you've been taught to look at it. Silence. Not awkward, just honest. Ree clapped his hands. All right, let's shut it down before it drinks all the gas. Donovan leaned in and turned off the ignition. The engine clicked, cooling. Julia stepped back, peeled off her gloves. Thanks for letting me work on it, she said, mostly to the air. Victor grinned. Nah, thanks for showing us what we missed. Before anyone could ask what she'd do next, she answered without being asked. Ree leaned against the wall. So, what's next for you? Julia looked around, at the car, the men, the space that had shifted. I graduate in a few months. Then I head to Cambridge for MIT's summer program. MIT's lucky to have you, Victor said. She smiled, small but sure. I used to think I had to prove I belonged in places like that. And now? Rick asked. Julia looked him straight in the eye. Now I know I do, whether anyone else believes it or not. Ree let out a long whistle. That right there. That's why you're going to make it. Donovan relaxed beside her, arms finally at ease. Told you all, he said. She's been ahead of the curve since she was 15, rebuilding transmissions for fun. Traz cleared his throat. All eyes turned. She's got skill, he said quietly. No doubt. Julia nodded. Appreciate that. Traz glanced at Donovan, then her. If you ever want to work in a shop after school, let me know. I've got a spot. That caught a few off guard. Donovan stayed quiet. He looked at Julia. She paused. Thanks, but I've got other plans. It wasn't arrogance, just clarity. Rick nodded. Respect. Victor laughed. Can't blame her. Shops like this don't always help you grow. Julia looked at her dad. We heading out? He grabbed a towel. Yeah, let's beat the heat. As they walked toward the bay doors, Ree jogged up. Hey, before you go. They stopped. Ree hesitated, hand raised. Just don't forget us when you're building rocket ships or whatever. Julia smiled. You fix a Ferrari, you don't forget the garage. Victor called out. You're a mechanic, Julia. No matter what degree they give you. She paused at the door. Maybe, but I think I'm something else too. What's that? Ree asked. A builder, she said. Of engines, of ideas, maybe even of better ways to treat people. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Donovan opened the truck door for her. She slid in, backpack slung across her chest, MIT's letter poking from the zipper. As they drove away, the V-12's echo lingered behind them. After a few minutes of silence, Donovan asked, Think they'll treat the next girl different? Julia leaned back. Some of them will. The rest? They'll learn. And in that garage, more than a car had been repaired. Something had changed. By Monday morning, the shop didn't sound the same. The usual banter, quieter. No football scores, no casual jabs. Just something different, something respectful. Mid-morning, Ree leaned over a '72 Mustang and looked at Victor. I can't stop thinking about Saturday. Victor didn't look up. Same. She didn't make us look bad. She made us realize we stopped learning. Rick passed by, Torx wrench in hand. She didn't shame us. She showed us what's still possible. And for the first time in a long time, they all believed it. Even Traz had been quiet since that day. That morning, he walked into the shop without barking orders or hovering behind the younger techs like usual. Instead, he moved slowly across the floor, pausing every now and then to glance at the Ferrari. Fully repaired now, its cover pulled back just enough to remind everyone it hadn't been forgotten. And though he'd never admitted aloud, Traz had stayed late Sunday night, studying the diagnostic logs she'd created. The numbers didn't lie. The code was precise. The fix was clean. She wasn't lucky. She knew exactly what she was doing. Back in Bay 2, Ree grabbed a rag and wiped his hands. You know, I was always taught this trade was all about repetition, doing the same thing until your hands don't forget. But watching her, she wasn't just repeating. Every move had a purpose. Victor chuckled softly. Made me realize how lazy I've gotten, settling for good enough. It wasn't shame. They weren't used to that kind of quiet honesty in a place built more for noise and bravado. Rick leaned against the wall nearby. What stuck with me the most? She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just didn't want her dad to be embarrassed. A few heads nodded. Even Jeer, the youngest tech fresh out of trade school, looked up from his notes. She's probably younger than me, and here I am, Googling how to reset a throttle body. Ree laughed. We all do that, don't feel bad. But she made it look like instinct. Like it was part of her, Jeer said quietly. Maybe it was. Later that afternoon, Traz called Donovan into his office. No threats, no warnings, just a quiet request to talk. Donovan stepped inside and wiped his boots before crossing the threshold. Like always, he sat without being asked. I was wrong, Traz said, avoiding eye contact. I shouldn't have challenged her. Or you. She's sharp. Sharper than anyone under 30 I've met. Donovan nodded. She is. Traz exhaled deeply. You raised her right. Didn't raise her to fix engines. She just picked that up on her own. I know talent when I see it. And she's got it. Donovan stood. She's got more than talent. Patience. Focus. The kind that comes from wanting to do the work, not impress anyone. Traz leaned back in his chair. Think she'll ever come back here? No, Donovan said. But that's not the point, is it? Traz shook his head slowly. It's not. Outside the office, Ree passed Donovan coming out. Everything cool? Yeah, Donovan said, adjusting his cap. Better than it was. Ree smiled. You tell her we're rooting for her. Donovan stopped. You should tell her yourself. That idea stuck in Ree's head all day. But before the week was out, someone else at the garage would take it and turn it into something more. Friday came fast. The heat in Tempe had already climbed past 95 degrees by noon. The shop fans only stirred the sweat in the air. Still, there was a new kind of energy, steady, low-key, as if the whole garage had finally taken a breath it didn't realize it was holding. Around 2 p.m., Ree stepped outside carrying a small plain box. Inside was a framed photo printed from the shop's security footage. Julia, arms deep in the Ferrari's engine bay. That laser-focused look on her face. Below the photo, a plaque read, "The day we learned again." He brought it into the break room and hung it above the cracked coffee machine nobody had bothered to fix. A few of the guys gathered. That from Saturday? Rick asked. Ree nodded. We're not forgetting it. Victor walked in and stared at the photo a long moment. She didn't even know we were watching. Exactly, Ree said. That's what made it real. At home, Julia sat cross-legged on the garage floor with a half-rebuilt motorbike between her knees. The heat didn't bother her. She was used to it. She liked the clink of tools, the grit under her nails, and the way an engine spoke if you just listened close enough. Donovan stepped out with 2 glasses of lemonade. Thought you might need something cold. Thanks, she said, wiping her brow. He handed her the glass and leaned against the tool chest. He called you sharp, Donovan said. Who? She asked. Traz. Said you're sharper than most people he's ever met. Julia snorted. Doesn't change how he acted. No, Donovan agreed, but it means he's thinking about it. That's something. She took a sip, then set the glass beside a box of spark plugs. Think they'll remember me? I think they'll remember what you showed them. And what was that? That there's always more to learn. That answer hung between them, heavy and true. A few days later, Ree stopped by their house unannounced, pulling a manila envelope from under his arm. Donovan opened the door. Well, look who it is. Just wanted to drop something off, Ree said. Julia came to the door, hands still greasy from her rebuild. This is for you, Ree said, handing over the envelope. She opened it to find a certificate printed on thick paper, the Traz Automotive logo faint in the background. Across the top it read, Honorary Lead Technician Jalaya Morton below. in sharp black font. For technical excellence, leadership under pressure, and reminding us why we started turning wrenches in the first place. Her eyes scanned the paper slowly. She didn't say much, just looked up and said, "Thank you." Ree scratched his chin. Most people spend years trying to earn something like that. "I wasn't trying to earn anything," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." They stood quietly for a moment before she said, "You didn't have to do this." Ree met her eyes. "We did." After he left, Julia pinned the certificate on the corkboard in her room, right above her MIT letter and next to her first spark plug rebuild tag from 3 years ago. Not for validation, but to remind herself that change is possible, even in places that never asked for it. She never went back to Traus Automotive. She didn't need to. What happened there had already done its work. The guys in that garage started asking more questions, listening more, thinking twice before talking down to the next kid who looked different or thought differently or showed up with their own tools. And Traz? He stopped pretending to know everything. 2 months later, he hired his first female apprentice, not for headlines, but because no one rolled their eyes when the idea came up. They were ready. As for Jalaya, she kept building. Engines, machines, her future. Piece by piece, wire by wire. Because when someone dares you to prove yourself, you have two choices. Step back or show them who you already are. She didn't prove herself that day. She revealed herself. If this story struck a chord with you, made you rethink what talent looks like, make sure to subscribe. More stories like this are coming, and maybe one of them will be yours.